Hello and welcome to this discussion on your IP or future with Creative First. Our guest today is Paula McGlynn, co-founder and director Gulbadan Talkies and subsidiary Marathi content brands Bharatiya Digital Party, also known as Bhadippa, Bhatupa, and Vishek Hole. Bhadippa has produced critically acclaimed series Pandu and Once in a Year for MX Player. She is also the writer and director of the Marathi web series Shantit Kranti on Sony Live. Bhadippa has become a voice for young Maharashtrians and has created an ecosystem of over 1 million loyal followers. She's originally from Vancouver, Canada, and came to India in 2012 to research how the Canadian and Indian film industry can increase business collaborations. She eventually settled in India after founding the production company Gulbadan Talkies with partners Sarang Sate and Anusha Nandkumar. She holds a degree in fine arts with a major in filmmaking. Paula, welcome to this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey from Canada to India and why you set up Gulbadan Talkies?
Yeah, I had just finished my fourth year of filmmaking at Simon Fraser University. And there was an email which had come to me through my university screenwriting professor saying that there's an opportunity for students to go to India to do internships. And it would be an expenses paid trip, for 6 weeks. And I was, of course, interested in an expenses paid trip to India. Who wouldn't be? And I took that up with very low expectations and did not at all expect things to turn out the way that they are today. Right before the trip, the internship got canceled, and rather than canceling the entire trip, the government program said that instead of just doing an internship, why don't you do some research and write a paper about how Canada and India can do more film business together, which was something that actually was far more interesting for me than interning with a VFX company. So I went from Chennai, Mumbai, Pune, and Hyderabad, explored these different cities, the different film industries, and interviewed people from the Indian film industry, from parallel cinema, Bollywood, Tollywood, and all the regional languages in those areas, and learned a lot about what was going on in India. So it completely opened my mind to the industry and what potential there is in India as a market and as a place to explore myself as a filmmaker. And I kept coming back after that. The research, we started orienting it towards the concept of getting around the fact that at that time, in 2012, there was no co-production treaty signed between Canada and India. And it had been in negotiation for over 7 years, and nobody really had any hope or idea of when it would get signed. So this was about how do we go around that and do co-ventures in film, and what if those are possible, based on what I've learned about the industry over here, what kind of projects would most benefit from a co-venture. Of course, 2 years after doing all of that research, the co-production treaty got signed. But as I was saying, the co-production treaty got signed 2 years after we completed the research. And still till date, 10 years since I first came to India, 11 years actually, there still hasn't been any co-production between Canada and India. However, I've been in India now working for over almost 10 years. And I started a production company with my partners, Sarang and Anusha, after my third trip to India. And we had met when I was assisting on a film that was being shot in Pune. And overall, the entire experience really drove home how important some things were to the three of us, which generally didn't seem to be standard practice in the industry. Our values and our morals just didn't match up with what we were experiencing. And one was that we really believed that regional language cinema ought to be given, as much importance as a Hindi language entertainment. We also really believed that contracts were extremely important and have been saved in our careers in as a business and as individuals many times because of the contracts which we have negotiated really hard for. And overall, just the idea that we should be having a nice work environment where people feel safe, they feel accepted and valued and respected. And on the basis of these kind of three pillars, we founded Gulbadan Talkies with the original intention of making ad films and getting a lot of profits into the company, and eventually we'll be self-producing our own movies. But that is something which changed because at the time we entered India, there was a drastic shift in the entire industry for many, many reasons. But eventually that led to us launching this Marathi entertainment brand and sort of using that as a way to get ourselves to the place where we want to be making, premium level entertainment.
So it's really interesting that, you're invested in the regional space, because that's really the chunk of most of the entertainment that's growing today, around 46%, according to a recent report. How important is it to understand the value of copyright for most of these producers? Because you may be, possibly having a contract with YouTube or with any of the streaming platforms, from your experience.
Oh gosh. Well, having an understanding of IP and copyright is fundamental to how business is done these days. It's no longer about just making something and selling tickets. Nowadays, especially in the regional language space, it's still we're still in a place where most of the country does not give enough screens to regional language films, which means that it's very difficult to expect full return on your investment just from a theatrical release. And you will need to understand when you go into making a film that if you hold on to the copyright and the IP, there are so many different ways that you can earn money from that project, from that film, than just a theatrical release. You have the licensing, you have royalties, you have spin-offs, remakes, merchandising, and all of these things come from, they're only possible if you own the IP and you have a well thought out contract with whoever your financer is or the platform that you're working with. So it's extremely important. And as soon as you enter into the digital space, it becomes even more difficult to control, and yet extremely key to control as well.
What are some of the key differences you've noticed in the process from production to distribution, in your time in Canada and now in India?
Honestly, there's not really much difference in the process. I mean, technically, it's the same work. The main difference would probably come up in terms of the approach that producers have toward the process. So, and that's a mindset problem rather than anything else. So one thing which is at the top of my mind at the moment is, of course, because the Writers Guild of America is on strike, because writers are not able to earn more money when their projects are successful. What happens in American television is if a episode or a show that a writer has created is a big hit and keeps getting retelecast or keeps getting replayed online, or basically if that revenue keeps coming in, the writer will always get a share of that. But what happens in the US and across the world is that with OTTs, that stopped happening because these platforms are not very transparent in terms of how many views you get, how many things are happening, and all of the top content coming out right now is based on OTT. So right now what the Writers Guild of America is fighting for is one of the things is to get royalties on OTT releases. and being able to at least argue for a higher price if they're not going to get those kind of royalties. However, in India, there was never a system like that. It could be negotiated by a writer to get a percentage of profits in a project, but generally only if you are already a hit-making writer who has that kind of negotiation skill and capacity. But apart from that, there's really no protection which you have as a creator. The other difference, apart from, say, having that system of royalties and unions and these associations which make sure people will be continuing to get paid for the work that they've helped create, the big approach that's different is time spent and where the energy is invested. See, generally around the world, people will shell out tons of money for stars and whatnot, but in India, one of the reasons why you don't see top quality animation films being produced in the country is because producers don't have the tolerance to wait for 5 years for a film to be ready to come out with that level of quality. The stories are good, everything is great, but a producer doesn't have the tolerance to wait for that time. But still, an Avengers and Black Panther and everything is being made in India. It's just not being produced here. Similarly, that applies to scripts. When a platform is commissioning work, almost every show that we've been working on, generally people expect the scripts to be ready within 3 to 6 months. Doesn't matter if it's a 4-hour piece of content, half-hour episodes times 8, or if it's a 6-episode or a 10-episode, everybody somehow expects the writing to be done in 3 months, which it never is, because it's just not enough time. And then the investment that goes into that is generally quite low in terms of the proportion of money that's spent in the overall budget in India. I think writers get paid much less than they would abroad for the proportion of, as per like a percentage of the budget comparison. So these are the two major differences. And coming from Canada, I would say there's a fundamental systematic difference, which is in the financing. Say Canada is a largely government-funded or government-subsidized industry. So if we're not doing service work for American films and television or Chinese films and television, then a lot of the stuff which is produced within Canada is going through a government funding where there's a grant that's been applied for or funding that's been applied for. And based on a series of requirements and tick boxes, you will get that funding or not. Whereas in India, it's far more based on the private market, the private equity market. Is this something which can sell? Is this something which will give us a return on our investment? And looking at entertainment in a far more commercial sense. Whereas in Canada, it tends to go into more of an experimental cultural value sense. Because the government is investing in it, it has to have some justification. Whereas in India, it's, a producer is investing in it, so they need to get their money back, at least with some amount of percent interest. Otherwise, it might as well just be a loan shark and give money out to people and collect the interest. Right. So those are two differences specifically between Canada and India, which makes it a little difficult for the industries to collaborate. But as for a process and approach, it's really about tolerance of risk and an attitude towards writers, which I would say are the biggest differences.
Bharipa's productions feature primarily on YouTube, which is a growing OTT space, also for independent filmmakers. What drove this decision, and do you think it's sustainable in the long run? Vis-a-vis having probably a full-fledged, streaming platforms or licensing content to other streaming platforms.
So having our own YouTube channel it's been an incredible journey for us. It's been extremely empowering for so many reasons. The motivator at the time was combined. When we first had the idea to start a Marathi language YouTube channel, we were on one hand frustrated because we had several shows which had been in development that were not getting, they were not going to get any kind of budget that they needed through television, nor were they going to get produced internationally. And there was just nowhere for premium, short format series to go. And when and that was something that we really loved. And as well, when it came to the film ideas which we had, they were Marathi or different language projects, which producers would either tell us they would be too niche because there's maybe more suited what they would call it like as a festival film, something which doesn't earn its money back, to fall into the same box as all of the other commercially successful films that have come before it. And as consumers of content and as creators of content, this was leading to a lot of frustration. And we were not seeing the kind of entertainment that we would like to consume coming to us through mainstream media. And the people around us were all complaining about the same thing. And there was, in the Marathi cultural sphere, also a lot of talk about how young Maharashtrians are not consuming Marathi language content, and a fear that they're going to lose their language because Hindi is so much cooler, or like they have better budgets. All the top talent is going to Hindi. And that was the general atmosphere, which led to the inspiration when we saw that TVF had just put out its first web series out of Permanent Roommates. And we thought, oh my God, okay, finally there's on really good quality content and people are watching it. And since we had been working a lot with brands doing viral videos for them, their branded digital content for their pages, we had a strong confidence that we could make something that people really want to watch. And if we were in control of the content and the audience was coming to us, why wouldn't we be able to monetize by asking a brand for the privilege of sponsoring our video rather than the other way around, where we're asking them for the privilege to make their content? So we decided that this is a great business model. We had a plan that we were going to have 3 channels. We were going to do different kinds of content buckets. We'd be serving a market which is absolutely nobody making anything in Marathi right now, which is in the digital space. And we did struggle a lot for the first 3 years. From 2016 to 2019, we had no funding, and we were working as freelancers in the film industry, and we were still doing ad films, and all of the money and profits that we might have been making were going back into the company to make more content, and we were financing our lives with our own personal work. After 2019, we finally got investors, and that kind of ramped everything up 10 times. So now we've all been full-time working within the company and building it out to make it a place where young Marathi people can come and be entertained, to where brands can come and reach out to that audience. And 3, it's been empowering because of the YouTube channel, we got to make our first web series for OTT platforms. We were able to prove that there was a market for this kind of content that we like to create, for this kind of global perspective, yet in regional language. And we were also able to show, that as a production company, we had the skills to pull off something more premium. And over the years now, we've probably made now 4 web series on our YouTube channel, plus another 4, I guess, which are on OTT platforms. 1 is yet to release. And there's many more happening as well, in the Hindi language as well. But for us, it's been great because we were able to prove a point. There's numbers to our name. You know, we have 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube. And for a platform who wants to get new audiences onto their platform, if we're making a series, obviously we're going to promote it. And if, you know, Buzz, 10% of our audience goes and pays $3.99 to watch something on another platform, that's a huge amount of revenue. So for us, having an audience has given us a lot of bargaining power, which we wouldn't have had otherwise.
You know, what a fantastic journey. It's amazing, especially, you know, for a regional language like Marathi. So this is really a proud moment. Paula, it's been a wonderful journey for Bhadepa, for filmmakers of young producers looking to raise finances. What is the kind of process they should follow, and any tips that you can share with them?
I think one thing we see a lot at Bhadepa is every day there's at least 3-4 emails coming in saying, "Sir, ma'am, please give me an opportunity. I have an idea. I really want Bhadepa to make it." And frankly, we just leave those emails read. We don't even bother responding to them. And while I think a lot of people might find that really disappointing, the truth is that if you've not even bothered to write a concept note and share that, or if you haven't bothered to even try and sell yourself and pitch your idea properly, the question is, who are you? And if you're not putting that time and energy into your project, why should we? That is the number one thing, is you need to convince an investor that your idea is the best idea. And frankly, there's one thing which I think a lot of people starting out get a little scared of, which is the fear that their ideas might get stolen. This is something which has happened in the past many times. In fact, it could probably happen every day, but there's ways to protect your content from those kinds of things happening. Number one, if you have like the easiest thing to do is just have a written track record. If you have a chain of emails where you've shared your idea, you have some evidence that it's substantially similar to something that same producer had went down the road and made without you, then I feel like that is a lot of evidence to suggest that it's been stolen. But then you also have the Screenwriters Association. You can register your work with them. They will support you in that argument if something has been stolen. And also just having that Screenwriters Association tag on your content would scare away a lot of producers who would perhaps be looking for stuff to steal. But honestly, for a lot of new people going out there in the world and selling their ideas or pitching their ideas to be sold, the price at which somebody can buy right now is so low that it doesn't make sense to take that risk and steal it. You might as well just pay that money to that person. If it's not maybe 1 or 2 lakhs, depending on what language, how far along the idea is. This is a random number, but say if you're just starting out and you don't have any work behind you, I know a lot of people who will write an entire film for that kind of money. So it just, in many ways, financially, it doesn't make sense to steal ideas. So I would say that when you're just starting out, try to protect yourself against theft, but don't let that prevent you from getting your foot in the door. And what you need to do is pitch the hell out of yourself. And if possible, invest that time and energy into your project. If you don't have money, the least you can do if you have an idea is make a pitch deck. Put your concept, put your story, put your characters, put your visuals, and that's all free to do. Then if you have the skill to write your outline, write your treatment, write your script. Because for a producer, eventually, even if they like your idea at a concept level, most producers will not take the risk to invest in the development if you don't have a proven track record up until then. So you will need to do that yourself. So I think that that's something a lot of people don't do until someone tells them to do it. So if anybody's watching this, I'm telling you to do it. Please write your scripts, do it, put in that time. Otherwise, it's very difficult for someone like me to think, is it really worth investing in this person?
You were mentioning co-production treaties earlier, right? And co-ventures, but specifically on co-production treaties, because I guess it would be a great platform for independent filmmakers. But how does one really go about it?
So co-productions between Canada and India specifically would require some amount of investment from both countries. The minimum ratio is 20-80, 80-20. So if 20% of the funding comes from India, 80% will have to come from Canada. And there's a certain list of rules and requirements that your project will have to check off in order to qualify for, say, a Canadian government funding. Some of those things include having experienced people in your team. If you are a new filmmaker, you would need to, say, have an experienced producer or an experienced writer, somebody who can carry your project with their experience if you are new. And when it comes to a project like this, and one of the reasons why there haven't been any co-ventures or co-productions between Canada and India officially, there have been unofficial ones, like a lot of Punjabi films shoot in Canada, they release in India. Those could count, but they're all done kind of undercover, unofficially, as things shot in Canada. So keeping that aside, if you're going to do it and you're going to get, say, a telefilm grant or a National Film Board of Canada grant, you will need to give a good reason why your film should be a co-production. Is there something about your film which requires Canada money? And why would the Canadian government feel that it should invest in this? So similarly, like you would be pitching to a producer, you would also have to pitch to a government body then instead of a producer, that this needs Canadian money because, for example, we have characters who are based in Canada, they need to be shot in Canada, and hence it's a very important part of our story. That's why it has to have Canadian funding. But then that funding also needs to be reflecting that. So then if it's 50% coming from Canada, you'll get 50% of your budget from Canada. The other 50% coming from India, you will have to justify that expense that's happening in India with Indian funding. And the reason why it was very difficult up until very recently is India's only just announced having benefits and financial reimbursements for co-productions filmed in India. So now I think there's an Indian program where I think up to 2.5 crores of money spent in India, you can get back on your project if it's an official co-production. But for that, again, you'll have to go through a process of applications, reviews, audits, and such. And then you will get your money back after the release. So that investment is still important up front. It's not really necessarily easier. It's just a very different beast. So you kind of have to just pick which one you want to tame first.
Moving away from just India-Canada co-productions, if there is a story, it's a powerful story, it could be even a regional story, it could be a Marathi story. And just like movies like Lunchbox, which had amazing funding from, different governments as well. Just wanted to understand in that case, what would the process be, and how do these filmmakers really go about pitching? If the process is in place, how do you really go about pitching so that you kind of get the funding?
Are you asking in terms of like the actual steps on how to pitch? Or are you asking about what would be the avenues to get funding?
So a bit of both. I think most people know about the different, co-production treaties, or, even sometimes countries do fund a different project for diversity, different projects that they launch. So they're already aware of that. Considering those projects are running successfully, people don't know really how to go about it in terms of approaching them. That, and, as an additional resource for funding.
Okay. Well, from a producer perspective, if you have a project that you want to launch, then the first thing you'll need to do is find out if you have, say, a script and you want it to be a multi-country co-production. It could be 2 countries, 3 countries, however you want to structure it. The first thing you'll have to do is take a look at that list of names and make sure your project fits within it. And for those countries, you will then need to find producing partners in those countries who will represent that side of the production. So as an Indian producer, you could lead a co-production, but you will very much need to have that support from your co-producers, because they will have to apply for the funding from their country. You will not be able to apply for it. You will have to support the Indian side, and they'll have to support, say, the Canadian or the British or the Fijian side, however that is. So you will need to find those good producing partners. You can meet them online through LinkedIn, or you can go to film festivals and meet them, or you can go to, International Film Forum. There's many different ways to approach it. But what I would suggest in terms of what my preferred approach would be is to take a look at people who have done co-productions in the past. Take a look at the films. If you like the film, talk to the producer, reach out to them somehow and say that I have something that might work for you, rather than just going and shooting in the dark at whoever it might be. So you do want to be a little selective in your process and your approach. But if you are a writer and director, then the first thing you'll need to do is find an Indian producer who is capable of what all I just said. Somebody who is not afraid to go out and find co-production partners, and who has the skill set and even the professional, legal, technical know-how to go through a process which is like a government-led audit, having the agreements in place which are watertight, making sure that nothing's going to fall apart. So, you can't just go with any random producer. You will need to have somebody who has a bit of a reputation for working within the acceptable international lines of, laws and ethics.
Paula, from your experience, what are the keys, could you share some secrets about how you really build these brands as a producer of content?
Eventually, when it came to us and our YouTube channel, we knew that since we were going to be investing a lot of time and energy and building up something which would be long lasting, and we couldn't take any risks of copyright strikes. And while a lot of YouTubers do use and rely heavily upon other people's content, say whether it be film reviews, whether it be reaction videos, whether it just be some funny compilation of TikTok videos or whatever it is, that is technically in violation of copyright. And if somebody chooses to take action because you've used their song without permission, not only can your video be demonetized, but your channel can get a copyright strike. And the rule at YouTube is 3 strikes, you're out, and your channel gets entirely taken down. No matter how old it is, no matter how many original videos you have, if you have 3 videos which have used some song and that song owner says, nope, I'm not sharing this with you, they can literally hold your entire business in the palm of their hand. So you should never put yourself in that position if you're getting started. YouTube and Facebook have free audio libraries where you can use copyright-free music. And as far as our experience has gone, if you're using it, if YouTube free music, then that video is still yours. You still own the copyright to that video. You will still be able to monetize that video. There's no issue even going into the future. But that's also not a blanket rule. For example, on Instagram or Meta, where places people are making content using actual songs released by artists from their latest album, those are marketing techniques that they want people to come in and hear their song, make it viral so that people will play it. They are actually not giving you the right to use their song forever. It's just as long as Meta has that contract active with the song. And you may find that if you go back at an old viral video, which was using a good song, a lot of times that music will not be available anymore and the audio of that video will be gone. So you've lost whatever time and energy has gone into that is now a loss because it doesn't exist anymore. So my first rule would be, make sure that as much as possible, you should be using original content or rights-free, royalty-free, copyright-free, Creative Commons content. If you need something else, and there's a lot of platforms out there which can provide this stuff for a very cheap cost, either be through stock footage, you can get licenses or subscriptions to these things. So there's a lot of avenues out there. They do cost money if you want really good quality stuff, but there are ways around it. And always consider that just because there's this thing called fair use, it doesn't mean someone can't take you to court. And that is something which, say, as an owner of this company who has, say, 20 young people, 25-year-olds making videos for Instagram and YouTube and whatnot, we have to keep hammering the idea that just because other people are doing it does not mean that you should do it too, if this is something that you really care about as a long-term piece of content. If you don't care about it and it gets taken down one day, whatever, no big what. But for us, it's also our entire business. It's a 7-year-old channel. If someone gives us a copyright strike, it's just not worth the risk, in our opinion. So it's a choice you can make. But even if it's a film review, if you're talking badly about the film and you've used the film in your video, they can put a strike on you and they can take you to court. And just because it's fair use, because you're doing a commentary about that film, does not protect you from a legal notice.
Thank you so much, Paula, for sharing amazing insights, and all the best for everything that you've been doing so far.
Thank you so much. And all the best with this project.
Thanks.